Hey everybody, this is the Secret of the App Stores talk. My name is Japeth Dillamn. I've been making games for about 27 years, started when I was 10. I have about 500 million users across all of my titles, most notoriously known for starting Yetizen, which is the world's first accelerator, and we have a fund opening up next year to invest in game startup companies. Here's just a few of the brands that I've touched through my career. Just getting all this out of the way so you can get to know who I am. And these are the three topics we're going to cover through the presentation. We're going to talk about the ranking algorithm on the back end of the app stores and how they rank the apps. We're going to be talking about campaigns, how to run a successful burst and sustain campaigns, and strategically, what does that look like? And then finally, I'm going to show you my tool bag and tricks of the trade for app store optimization. So there's a lot of content we're going to be squeezing into a very short amount of time. So we're going to start off with the ranking secret sauce. Just a very generic background. This is brand new. Discoverability never existed before on any previous platform. You used to have to go to GameStop and Walmart and all these different retail channels to find your games. Now you have one single repository that shows you all of your content in one place, and that's the App Store. And so on all the app stores, we have all the content in one place that we can find. That's called discoverability. And one quick note before we really dive in deep, organic does not equal viral, and viral does not equal organic. Viral is when I invite somebody and they get infected, and they invite other users because they were infected by me. Organic is when you discover that content on your own. You find that content, you're hungry for it, that's organic. And why are we talking specifically about organic? Organic installs, when you measure the performance of all the different types of installs, organic users perform better by leaps and bounds, better than any other type of traffic. There's viral, there's incentivized installs, all these different types of installs. Organic traffic has the most engagement, the highest LTV. So we are going after that cream of the crop, the organic users, and so we're going to dive into how do we tap into those organic users. So the formula on iOS was the first smartphone to the market. The oldest formula, this is not the current, I'll get to that in a moment. The oldest formula on iOS originally was the number of installs over the last week. And however many installs you had would float you up to the top of the store. The problem with that, there was not very much flexibility on the App Store. You would see apps moving up very slowly and moving down very slowly. There wasn't a lot of flexibility. So iOS introduced a newer formula. This is still not the newest one. But I'm showing you the evolution and their thought process as to how they came to the newest formula. So it's the number of installs over the last 24 hours, plus your rating, plus your engagement, plus your sales. And when they started to take into account just the 24 hours, you saw a lot more flexibility, a lot more change in the App Store, but it wasn't quite as refined as they wanted it to be. So this top secret is iOS's formula. This slide is 80% of the formula. The next slide will be 20% of the formula on how they calculate the rankings on the back end. So it's the number of installs over the past 4 days on a weighted system, number of installs over the past 4 hours on a weighted system, and here's what the weighting looks like. Today's installs with a multiple of 8, yesterday's a multiple of 5, 2 days ago times 5, and times 2 for the last. And that reflects the same against the last 4, 3, 2, and 1 hours as well. And the number of installs over the past 4 days is weighted 50% more than the installs over the last 4 hours. So that's a very complicated formula. I'm going to show you some things you can derive out of this as a developer to take home so that you can take advantage of this formula. Now that you know the formula, here's the other 20% of it. It takes into account your stars, the number of reviews, and your total rating. So, and also your engagement and your sales. A note about the stars, they also take into account the bell curve. So let's say you have a 3.5 and your competitor has a 3.5. You both have the same rating, but you have a lot of 3s and 4s, and he has a lot of 2s and 5s, so his bell curve is wider. You're going to perform better than him if you have a tighter bell curve. Anyway, so now that we know the formula, here's just a couple of insights we can glean from that. What we do know is that on weekends, you're going to see about a 20% bump in traffic. However, to purchase users on the weekends, when you go out to buy out on the distribution channels, it costs about 50% more. So you're paying a lot more for that bump in traffic. So we recommend certain things like starting your campaign on a Thursday and starting to get that bump of traffic when it's cheaper. And remember, there's a 4-day tail to when you get up in the store before you start to drop off. And you're taking advantage of that formula. because you know how, let me just go back again real quick. You know that there's this descending order to it. So that's iOS. And the more you look at it, the more things start to pop out, the more you can take advantage of that formula. But let's move on to Android. This is where it gets really complex. There are more than 200 components on the back end of the Android algorithm and how they calculate the rankings. If you thought iOS was complex, it's nothing. iOS updates their algorithm about every 6 months to a year, so very slowly do they update their algorithm, and there's big announcements when they do. Android is updating theirs bi-weekly, so every other week they're adding components. So what I'm going to talk about with the Android formula are just the components that you can affect as a developer, the things that you can do that can actually impact your ranking. So I'm just going to ramble through this real quick, and then I'm going to dive into each one after that. So your install rate minus your uninstall rate. Your install velocity minus the long installs, web click-throughs, blah, 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 blah. You can read all this. I'm going to go into detail here. So the install rate minus the uninstall rate. Why does Google give you a hit? It hurts you when somebody uninstalls your app, because Apple has a curated process. You have to go through their curation process and get approved to be put on the App Store. Google chose to go the other route and let the community self-curate the App Store. This means that when somebody doesn't like your app and they delete it, it hurts your position in your ranking. So this is their method of approaching it in such a way that the community self-curates the content on the App Store. Why do they care about SEO and Google search? Well, Apple doesn't own search, Google does. They make money off of search. So the better you can appear in a search, the better you're going to appear in the App Store as well. So since they make money off of that, they're going to have that affect the algorithm in the App Store. Web click-throughs to Google Play Store. Again, they want to see more traffic being driven from the web to the Google Play Store. And if you are driving that traffic, they're going to bump you up in the App Store and give you more visibility. You're going to have a higher ranking because of that. Web click-throughs to Google Play Store. Sales. So this, I put a sad face. They don't take into account ad revenue. And as you know, on Android, a huge chunk of the revenue is ads, whereas on iOS, it's in-app purchases. So they're only looking at in-app purchases. They're not looking at ad revenue. So keep that in mind. That's not going to affect your placing in the store if you have great sales through ad channels. Geo-signal location. This is a really interesting one. What Google does is they look at all the social media mentions of your app and of your game out there in the wild. So they're monitoring, Facebook and Twitter, all the different social media sites. And as you get mentioned, it can bump you up in the store. However, the failing that a lot of developers do is they go after global PR, and that really doesn't affect them very positively. If you are going after a certain regional release, let's say you're getting released in India, it's completely pointless for you to go after TechCrunch and VentureBeat and all these websites to get you mentioned in their websites, because it's not going to impact you. But if you get mentioned within the geofenced location of India by media specialists, by PR, and somebody is in that zone searching the store, looking at the store within India, you're going to appear higher than your competitors. So there's little tricks you can do as a developer, again, by targeting PR within the regional districts that you're releasing your app. Anytime you implement Google Play services into your app, it's going to bump you up in the store as well. So they do look at that. Location of servers, freshness, so how often you update can sometimes bump you up as well. Social media reputation. This has weight. Again, a lot of weight if it's within a geocentric location, but Google Plus is weighted very heavily. And I'm going to talk about that one specifically at the end. They also do a little bit of testing of the speed of your servers and pings through the app. They have some machine learning algorithms to see the performance of it. They look at the engagement, and they look at the entire funnel from the App Store all the way down to how often people are returning in your app. What the click-through rate is to the app, what the install rate is, the open rate, and so on. So they're monitoring that entire funnel. The better you can increase the metrics of getting people to move forward, the better it's going to affect your placement in the store. The long install, this is an interesting one. This hurts you. A long install is when somebody installs the app, and then they play through it once, and then they delete the game. So that's called a long install, and every time there's a long install, it hurts your ranking. And they do some funnel analysis as well. So we already talked about SEO. I didn't mention other app stores. So they do not take into account your placement in other app stores and your sales and your downloads from other app stores. So if you are in the Amazon store and you have great ranking there and you have a lot of installs, it does not affect your placement in Google Store. However, if you have a female-centric game, as we know, Amazon has a much better performance with the female market, so it makes sense to go to other app stores in certain cases. But my point is it doesn't affect your placement in Google Play. They don't take into account ad revenue. We talked about these other things. Okay, so now we're going to talk about campaigning. So this shows you, let's say you start right here spending money on an ad campaign, and you see you burst in users and then you drop off. That length right there is about 4 days. Why? Well, if you remember back in the algorithm, there's a 4-day effect. So there's no surprise why this happens. So we're going to talk about how to do proper bursting campaigns. Back in the day, every channel used to promise you, we can get you to the top 10. We can get you to the top 10. Tapjoy, all of them out there. And that's because the volume of traffic on the app stores was low enough that any individual channel could drive you to the top 10. That is no longer true today. Most of them could, if you're lucky, get you to the top 25, and that's if they push a lot of their internal traffic and volume on their app store. And what happens is, let's say you spend the same amount of money and you come back to the same channel over and over. What happens, you have this diminishing return. Why is that? Because that volume of traffic on that particular channel has seen your advertisement over and over, and those same people have already seen that ad and they glaze by it and move on to the next. So you have less of an organic impact by going back to the same ad channel over and over. So how do we solve this? How do we get to the top 10? How do we fix this diminishing return problem? We do what's called stacking the channels. So I just put 3 here, but you don't spend more money. You spend the same amount of money, but across multiple channels at the exact same time. This bursts you to the top of the store because it's very fresh in all the eyes of that volume of traffic on each and individual ad channel. So we've bursted to the top. How do I stay to the top? How do I do a sustained campaign? How do I maintain my position? We do what's called flipping the channels. So I go from one network to another every few days or every week. And that way, when I go back to the first network again, that same volume of users has forgotten my creative, they've forgotten my ad, and I'm fresh in their eyes. And you can sustain your chart position, spend less money than you did on a burst campaign by doing this flipping the channels method. So here's what it looks like combined. You burst to the top, and you flip through the channels, and that's what a successful campaign looks like strategically on the back end. So in the early days, again, you could do about one channel, and then in the mid years of the App Store, you could getting to the top on about 3. Now it takes over 30 distribution channels to get to the top. Now again, it doesn't mean spending more money. What it means, it takes more intelligence on your end, takes more creativity to figure out how you're going to do those burst campaigns, and it takes a lot of management from a user acquisition specialist to plan out those bursts and get to the top of the store. However, that can put you leagues above your competition. If you are able to master this, you can get more users for less money than your competition. This is just a couple of quick charts I'll go over. The gold users here represent the ones that you purchased, and the white ones are your organic impact. So as you can see, once you start doing that burst and you get up in the app stores and you start getting visibility and organic view, then you have this huge volume of traffic that follows from installs from the App Store. And then just a quick note on organic installs. With gaming, you see about 100% impact, which is amazing. And with non-gaming, about 65% impact. So it used to be that you would see these exponential bursts in the app store as you got up into the store every 5, 25, 50, 10, 100, et cetera. And that was because in the original days on the iOS device, you would see the first 5. The user would have to take an action and scroll to see the top 10. Then they would have to hit a button that would load more to see the top 25, hit another button to load more to see the top 50. So in other words, every time a user had to take an action, you'd see a drop-off in organic impact. And now you swipe to the right. So you see, to the left. You see 4 apps at a time as you swipe. So now we see these exponential bursts as you crack into the in increments of 4. And a lot of people ask, like, how do I measure my organic impact? And what I told them is it really depends on the time of year, the number of competing apps, how many installs does it take me to get to the top. You get an organic rate of about 3 to 10x. In other words, for every user you buy, you can get 3 to 10 users organically once you get to the top of the stores. So at the top, this is an initial campaign we do, let's say, on NativeX. We do that initial campaign. The red line represents we bought that number of users, and the rest of that burst came from our organic impact. We go back to NativeX. We spend, again, the same amount of money. And what we see is a higher percentage of the users that we gained were purchased, and a lower percentage of them were organic. We go back again at the same time, and again, this happens. So how do we change that? You remember we flipped the channels, but how can we go back to NativeX, for example, and get that really good one on the top again? What we do is we have a new feature, or a new creative in the App Store, or a new creative in our ad distribution network that refreshes it in the minds of the users, and they haven't seen it before. They think it's something new and fresh, and so it revitalizes that organic impact all over again. So how many installs does it take to get to the top 10? And again, there is really no easy answer. It depends on the time of year, the number of competing apps within a category. Whether you're talking about Apple versus Google, there's about double the number of users on Google than there are on Apple. A whole slew of other factors. But people still demand, tell me, how many installs does it take to get to the top 10? All right, here, this is US only at the top, 80,000 in a single day. This is actually old data. I think it's a little over 100,000 in one day. You need 100,000 users in one day to get to the top 10. That's how big this volume is. So, wow. Again, the data's a little bit older, so it's about 100,000. Now double all these numbers for Google Play, but you need about 25,000, let's say maybe about 30,000 now in a day for the free charts, and about 4,000 to 6,000 in a day on the paid charts. So it's a lot of volume that you need to drive. So the question comes down to, what channels do I use to get that volume? You can go to print media, you can go to ads on websites. 148apps.com is one of the largest reviewed app sites online. You can use in-app channels. You can use NativeX and Tapjoy and incentivize installs. There's literally, on the App Store alone, about 2,400 different channels you can use. But the question becomes, does anything off of the device work? If I use print media, if I get interviews, if I get a good review, does that work? The short answer is no. The long answer is no. It does not work. Off-device marketing has virtually zero effect on your ranking. And why? So for example, on 148apps.com, you can have the top placement, a great review, and it's the most widely read blog review site of apps out there. That'll maybe net you a couple hundred users. Remember, you need 100,000 in a day to get to the top 10. It virtually doesn't move the needle. So the only channels that really work, and it doesn't mean spending money either. You can use cross-promotional networks like Chartboost. There's a lot of things you can do. That's within the App Store, within other people's apps. Anything on the device that cross-promotes you, anything that buys traffic, that's the only thing that actually has an impact on moving that needle for you. So now we're going to wrap up in the last section of the talk, which is App Store optimization. So now you know the algorithm on the back end of the App Stores and how it's calculated. You can do some tricks of the trade to take advantage of that and get a higher ranking. You now know how to run a campaign successfully. But you put your app up on the store and you have a crappy experience. People aren't clicking through and installing your app. So we want to really optimize this. I want to mention here 63% of all installs are initiated by search. That's huge. So all installs that come into apps come through search. That's just massive. Half the users search the store every week, and 12% search it daily. We're talking about an insanely addicted user base that's just driving tons of traffic on this device. It's growing. Just real quick mention again, just to prove my point, the top ones up there are on-device marketing, and the ones are off-device marketing. So as you can see, it's really only on-device marketing that works. So when I am doing my keywords, 75% of people are searching by the function and not by the brand. So they're not looking for United Airways. They're looking for flights. They're not looking for, again here in this example, they're not looking for Supercell. They're looking for a car racing game, not CSR. They're looking for card battle, not Supercell, just as an example. So keep that in mind as you are creating your App Store listing, your keywords, all these different things. People are looking for function. That's how they're searching the App Store. Longer app names are better because you only have a limited number of words that you can use in the keywords, and so the more you can stuff into that title, the better. But remember, if you get over 3 words, it can kind of muddle you in the results. So if it's 4 or 5, words long, and somebody searches the App Store, you could actually be muddled down in the results. And you want to get to the top. You want to be higher than your competition. And just a quick note, if you're putting keywords in the description itself, get them up to the top very quickly, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more depth. Just due to timing, I'm not going to hash over every single one of these, but do take a screen, a photo if you want. They're very important. But Ian McGee, who was the creator of the original PlayStation, he told me in a conversation one day, he said, think of Google Play as Google Search in 2004. So it's very outdated, but Apple's is even worse. He compared it to Yahoo in '95. It's just a joke. And while Google's is complex with over 200 components to the algorithm, think of how complex their search algorithm is out on web. It's hundreds or thousands of components on that search algorithm. So here's some 101 tips on keywords. Don't duplicate plural spellings. The engines actually count for that. So you're wasting a valuable keyword by duplicating those. If your intended keyword is in the title, don't use it in the keywords. You've just wasted another keyword. Key phrases for discovery. It is best if you can have it in the title. If not, the keyword is fine, but the algorithm that searches looks at the title first and then the keywords. And competitor analysis is huge. Find out what keywords are being used by your competitors, which ones are being ignored, which ones are trending and no one's taking advantage of yet. Monitor that very closely, and at the end of the presentation, I tell you about my bag of tricks to use for keywords. Let's move on. So don't use spaces, use commas. So here's an example. Magic, amazing, king, ball. Every space wastes another character that you could have used for a keyword. Cut out connector words, a, the, and, to, for, etc. Don't use names for numbers. That's very important. Anytime you can shorten down the characters, the app stores actually will search for NINE using the number 9. So they have that built in. Okay, so these are on your page, on the App Store page itself. You have keywords, you have description, you have your icon, and you have your title. I just want to have some people in the audience guess, what do you think is the most important thing of those in your listing? Which one has the most impact in driving installs? I heard icon, title. Anything else? Well, you are a very savvy crowd. It is, in fact, that damn icon. That icon, more than anything, drives installs to the store. We have done tons of analysis and testing. We've changed titles. We've changed screenshots, descriptions. That little icon from search to install has more impact than anything else. And then title, and then keywords, and then description. The icon, there's a lot of psychological studies out there on colors, on the use of eyes, on a number of different things. Take a look at all of these studies online for best practices. I always note the eyes because it's really funny to me. There was a study by Cornell University that showed children who were in the shopping, grocery shopping with their parents, if there was a cereal box that had eyes looking at them, they gravitated psychologically to that. And for some reason, we see that happening on the App Store as well. So just a little, I'm not saying use eyes in your app icon, but it has been a trick that's been noted to work. There are some dirty tricks you can use. Don't recommend them, but I will list them just so you're aware of what. You guys know Flappy Birds blew up on the App Store. There were a few things that they were doing that Apple was going to remove them for. A lot of the public doesn't know about this, but one of the tricks that they did that technically was legal, so where you would hit next, suddenly in that exact same spot on the screen, right after you hit next was review. And the users would constantly accidentally hit the review button and it would pop up, and that gave them tons and tons of reviews in the store, which gave them huge amount of organic visibility. That organic impact is massive. Using your competitors' titles and your keywords, like Coke or whatever, it can be dangerous. It depends on how litigious your competitors are. Google+, this is a really interesting one. So I mentioned earlier that in the Google algorithm, they look at all the different social media mentions of your app out there in the wild. Google+, if you get +1 to Google, it looks as if it's an endorsement. So it looks as if not only is that person liking it, but they're endorsing that to their community, and that has a really big boost on your impact in the App Store. So a few recommendations. I always say, don't give everybody the option to review your game right away. Just the people that are highly engaged, show them an option to review. People that are not engaged, ask them, how can we improve our experience for you? What can we do? And the more that you prod that user to give you feedback, the higher they're actually going to review you in the end. Some tips on the screenshot. Don't show a hand holding the device. So in the screenshot, do not show this. Psychologically, it breaks the user from associating themselves with that app. Just frame the screen itself. Consider every ad unit that you use as eye candy. And every piece of creative on the App Store also as an ad unit. And be very descriptive about specifically, here's what my game does, here's what my app does. Don't be vague. So here are some tools in my tool bag to use. App Annie is pretty amazing for doing trend analysis. App Annie acquired Distimo. App Annie, Distimo is insane, the amount of data you could get. It's a little bit expensive to buy that. You can get category analysis and things like that, but just the general App Annie tool itself is fantastic. Searchman SEO and AppNeek both. You can do a lot with keywords. You can set up trending analysis. You can set up alerts on specific keywords. Test Nest. So after this session, be sure to ask me for an intro to Test Nest. This is mind-blowingly amazing. It's auto-optimization of the App Store for you. It's self-serve, it's scalable. Everybody else out there that's doing optimization of the App Store, they are using a consulting service. They have some tools to use, but it's ultimately, at the end of the day, a consulting service. These guys, it's truly self-serve and scalable. Onavo was acquired by Facebook. This was $50,000 a month to buy the data on the back end for developers. I've been talking to Facebook. They're going to make this either free or very cheap for startup developers now. But they had a bit of a Trojan horse. They had 5 apps out on the App Store, and a user would agree to running a VPN on their mobile device by using one of their apps. And because they agreed to it, this was all legal and fine. But they measured everything that the user did. Every search term they entered, everything they clicked on. If you were a developer, you could buy that data package, and you could see what creatives your competitors were using. You could see what ad channels your competitors were going with. You could see everything. It was insane. Right now, it's not available after Facebook did the acquisition, but they're going to reopen it up again at a very inexpensive price point. So I've been told that we're running very short on time. The last session went over, so I'm just going to jump straight to questions now. Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes. Oh, we have a microphone, it looks like. If you are looking for consulting services, reach out to me. If you need some help, let me know. There's my email.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing your insight with us. My name is Kugan. I have an app on the Google Play Store and an iOS App Store right now, but it's been recently released and I haven't started any ad campaign yet. So there are plenty of services that
yes, there are.
Yeah. So I'm not sure which one to choose for banner ads because that's what I'm preferring to go with to begin with.
So you should look at the performance of the network. You should decide if you want to do incentivized or non-incentivized. There are literally 2,400 different options on the app stores alone to do advertising. I can make a couple of personal recommendations. Is Ryan Weber? Yeah, NativeX guy right there. They've got a very, very smart engine and can give you some amazing promotion. Talk to Ryan. Hold your hand up again, buddy. There you guys go. So, next question.
How does deep linking help in the overall rankings in the App Store? So deep linking on the Google search, how does it help in the rankings? Yeah.
Okay, deep linking is something very rarely asked about, very rarely talked about, a bit of a dark secret for some of us. But deep linking, the more you can show transition, and this only works for Google Play. It doesn't work for Apple as far as I understand. Deep linking is when you can kind of link from web to the app itself, and the more you can show from Google searches to the app, a little bit more bumps you up in your algorithm. One thing I didn't cover, I meant to add in last night, I completely forgot, is what we call keyword bombing. This is brand new. We've been doing a lot of testing in Russia, and we just started doing this with a few new clients in the United States. And this is where, instead of sending your users to the App Store to look for your name, you send them looking for a specific search term and tell them, find my game by looking for this. And the more people that click through on that individual search term, when others go to look for that search term, you appear as number one. So it's a really good way to dominate search. Any other questions? Yeah, in the back.
Hello. My question is, does URL shortness affect ASO?
I'm sorry, either my ears didn't quite hear you or... What is it?
Does URL shortness affect ASO?
Does my something impact ASO?
URL shortness.
I don't think so. I don't think URL has anything to do with your ASO.
Okay.
I know I've met with the Google team about a month ago. Again, they're updating about every 2 weeks, and as far as I know, they haven't updated that as of yet. I see Shruti, which means I'm probably going to get booted off the stage right away. No? Okay. Any last questions then? I guess we have a couple more minutes. Yeah.
So if your app is listed in Google Play, right? What is the impact of frequently changing the name of the game itself, adding terms to it, like changing the keywords in the game title itself?
So I covered that. I discussed that. I said the title is stronger than the keywords itself in the search algorithm. So if you can get any of those keywords in the title, great. But if your title is more than 3 words long, it can actually get you muddled in the results. So while you're trying to stuff as many keywords into that title as possible, you really don't want to go over 3. 4 is okay, but then you start to see diminishing returns as you go over that.
But if you are frequently changing it, is your ranking going to change because you frequently are changing it itself? Is Google going to not think that it's changing all the time and not rank you always better? Like if you're frequently changing it, is it a...
So one thing to remember is as you change the title, it's as if you're releasing a new release on the App Store. And so, well, it depends if it's iOS or Google. And if it's on iOS, it's as if you're releasing a new release. So it restructures the count number of installs. And the more installs you have, the better it can display. So I recommend doing lots of testing on the title and then trying to stick with that as long as possible. Any other questions? Yeah. I'm sorry, I can't quite hear. There's a loud air machine behind me. You guys probably can't hear it back there.
Or maybe I missed it in the beginning, so I'm asking this
Okay.
question. If you're a totally new app, how to be prominent on the App Store so that people recognize this is the app to go for?
So if you remember on iOS, for example, 80% of the formula is based on velocity of installs, I'll call it. So the speed and the number of the installs you're getting in the first 4 days and first 4 hours. And as a new developer, you're not going to be top ranking. But the faster you can get installs, the quicker you can jump up in that organic rating. So really, the other 20%, the vanity metrics, are going to take time for you to gather anyway. Reviews, engagement, stuff like that. So the one thing you can focus on is very quickly going out to friends of yours, cross-promoting the app, using different tools to get installs is really the only thing that's going to bump you up above your competition in a very short amount of time at the beginning. Any other questions, or am I done? How are we? Okay, yeah. I'm going to keep going until they step up on stage and drag me off, so go ahead.
Does the number of installs get impacted greatly based on the on whether the app offers in-app purchases?
So it doesn't impact the number of installs. It does impact your ranking, and your ranking can impact the installs. So in effect, yes. The more in-app purchases, now remember, the algorithm on the back end of those stores does not take into account ad revenue. So that type of sales doesn't matter. But it does take into account in-app purchases. The more in-app purchases you have, a slight bump it gives you in the App Store, and the higher visibility you get, the more organic installs you're getting. So in effect, good sales are driving more installs for you, but they don't, it's kind of a, in a roundabout way. Other questions? Okay, I think we'll just cut it off from there. I'll be out in the hallway if you have other questions. Thank you.